Happy Thursday, everyone. Tonight's lesson is on proportions. Just to review, a proportion is an equation that sets two ratios equal to each other. So, for example, 2/3 is equal to 4/6. And in proportions, the 2 and the 6, these are called the extremes. So you can write that in your notes. Whereas the 3 and the 4, they're called the means. And if you look at a proportion, you know that a proportion is true when the cross products are equal to each other. So for example, we have 2 times 6 is equal to 12, and that is equal to the product of 3 and 4. So when we solve proportions, we are going to use the cross product property. Okay? And when we have the cross product property, when we multiply those cross products, A times D, this number times this number, is called the product of extremes, and B times C is called the product of means. So you can write that in here as well, product of extremes and product of means. Now let's just dive into our practice problems. So in our practice problems, we'll be solving proportions using the cross product property, and hopefully you already have been exposed to this process. So in our work, we'd circle our cross products. 4 times 15a is 60a. 21 times -2 is -42. Then to solve for a, I need to divide both sides by the same number. So I'm going to be dividing by 60. And that leaves me with a is equal to negative, and you can leave it as a fraction. Divide both numbers by the same factor of 6. So 42 divided by 6 is 7, 60 divided by 6 is 10. So you can leave your answer as -7/10, or if you want to write a decimal, -7/10. Now let's jump into a problem that has expressions on certain parts of our proportion. So for practice problem number 2, if you feel like you can go ahead and do this on your own, go ahead. You may pause the video and just compare. So hopefully you got the following. I circled my cross products and I multiplied them. And I have 6x plus 2 equals 5x. I subtracted the 5x from both sides. That leaves me with x on the left. And I subtracted that 2 on the left as well as on the right. And that leaves me with x is equal to -2. And if you wanted to check your work, just substitute your solution back into the proportion. Just make sure that your proportion remains true. So for practice problem number 3, I would like you to solve the following proportion. X minus 5 over 12, or x minus 5 to 12, is equal to x plus 2 to 5. So go ahead and solve that proportion and write your solution in the form below. Okay, now we're going to move on to proportion word problems. Okay, for practice problem number 4, we have an investment of $1,200, paid interest of $102. How much interest would $1,600 invested at the same rate for the same amount of time pay? And what I like to tell my 6th graders is to make sure that they have their units involved. So I'm going to write investment on top and interest in the bottom. So that tells me I'm going to have $1,200 or $1,200 in the top and my paid interest of $102 in the bottom. So when I set up my proportion and my ratio for the other side, 1,600 is at the top, and I need to know the same rate for the same amount of time pay, and so that leaves me with my variable x here. Now in solving this, some people like to go straight into doing their cross products, so they'll go ahead and multiply 102 times 1,600 and 1,200 times x, and they'll get right away 1,200x equals whatever the product is of 1,600 times 102. Another option is if you want to deal with smaller numbers, you can simplify the ratio that has a complete fraction so that you're not dealing with such large numbers when you multiply or divide. And eventually, once you solve this, so you'll divide both sides by 1,200, x will be equal to $136. So these problems are actually a little bit easier than the ratio problems that we had in our last section of our notes and problems. And before we go into our last practice problem, I wanted to present our trivia for today. So proportions remind me of analogies. So for example, when you have a proportion like, 3 is to 5 as 6 is to 10, you can think about replacing these with words. So red is to blood as white is to snow. So these reminded me of analogies, and I was looking up some analogies in sample SAT questions, and I found this one. So medicine is to illness as blank is to blank. So I want you in the form to submit your response as to which of the following statements fits this analogy. Medicine is to illness as blank is to blank. Make sure you submit that in the form when you get to it. Okay, for our final problem, this is one where you'll submit your answer on the form. I'm just going to say it, not write it out, so that hopefully you're actively using your listening skills. A car travels 88 miles on 1/4 tank of gas. How much gas does it need to travel 264 miles? So again, use a proportion to solve this problem. A car travels 88 miles on 1/4 tank of gas. How much gas does it need to travel 264 miles? Go ahead and complete that problem, submit it on the form, and I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you bring any questions with you. Bye-bye.